Yesterday, Corruption Watch released its 2018 Mining Royalties Research Report that highlights the flaws in the mining royalty system of South Africa. Corruption Watch examined the history and the change in the mining royalty system and if poverty-stricken mining communities actually benefit from the system. Well, one thing the report reveals is that the plunder of mining royalties may be the most appalling tale of corruption and maladministration in the country, which involves mammoth sums of money stolen from the poorest of the poor. Those are the words of David Lewis, who's the Executive Director of Corruption Watch, and he joins us in studio to talk more about this. David, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Leon.
That's a very big statement to be making at this point, that this is perhaps one of the biggest corruption scandals. Talk to us about this.
It is a big statement, and your viewers and ourselves, and I'm sure yourself, are preoccupied with Eskom and the NPA and Transnet, and this happens largely under the radar. I mean, there are groups working on it, but for the most part it happens under the radar. And it involves the theft of hundreds of millions of rands from, as your intro says, the poorest communities in the country. I mean, you'll see in the report one old man and it's been happening since pre-apartheid days. One old man who we interviewed for the story, for the report, likened it to standing in a river and dying of thirst, because we're talking about some of the richest real estate on the planet, actually. Huge mineral resources. We looked at communities in the northwest and Limpopo. There's no reason to believe it's not happening elsewhere as well. And it's the most appalling story, and one that needs the most urgent attention.
Okay, let's look further and deeper into this now. It's the first time that a report like this has been compiled, so perhaps this is now the point where we actually are seeing how badly, because we've always spoken about it, we've always spoken to the point, but when we talk to the fact that they are so badly affected, I mean, what are we talking about? How massive is this?
Well, in just the case that we're looking at, you're talking about development accounts that were set up during the Bantustan era by the Mangope administration in Botswana. And I think, we're talking in the region of accounts that had in them at one stage 600-700 million rand and that have nothing. But the estimates are much larger than that. So we are talking about corruption on a scale of what you read about in let's say Eskom's procurement scandals, but you're talking about it as I say, stolen from communities that live in absolutely abject poverty. I mean, we think that we experience the impact of corruption in load shedding and the like, and we do. But the impact on these communities is unimaginable.
And voiceless communities, and that's something we need to put out there.
That's the point. These are communities that, there are law firms, NGOs, a small group of journalists who work on this, but for the most part, these are not communities who are surrounded by human rights lawyers, by NGOs, by media. And so a lot of this happens under the radar, and that's the real tragedy of this. I mean, what is happening outside of the metropolitan centers in South Africa, and this is a measure of what is happening.
So let's just go back to the basics, because in 2004, since 2004, it basically stipulates, this is what the law says, the mineral and petroleum resources belong to the people of the country, and that the state is merely the custodian of these resources. That's what the law states. But is this happening?
No. I mean, and that was a progressive law introduced, right, that the state should be the custodian of mineral resources on behalf of the community. And essentially, it's largely the provincial governments that are the custodians of the mineral resources in their areas, the provincial premiers, essentially. And while there are a lot of culprits in this story, it's largely their omission, intentional or otherwise, to not exercise their custodianship in a manner that benefits the community. I mean, the big question mark, of course, is who it benefits. And, you know, there are a range of people and institutions with their snouts in the trough here. They include provincial governments, they include traditional leaders, they include sometimes traditional councils, and they include mining companies. And it's a story that we really are intent on making part of the national conversation, because I think that's where it has to start. There has to be some light shone into these very dark, untraversed areas, and I hope the media start to do the same with it, because it's the only way we'll get the kind of attention to it that it warrants.
What's interesting about this, I know you say you focus on two specific areas, which we know, Limpopo, Northwest, but you conducted specific case studies, and you opened up the interview talking to the one and quoting one man that you spoke to standing in a river and dying of thirst. I mean, that is a great analogy and a good image to describe it. But perhaps you can go more into what these case studies have told us and what it is specifically perhaps that is going wrong and where we're going wrong with all of this.
Well, you know, there are two kinds of royalties. There are state royalties which go to SARS and through the revenue fund, and then there are the royalties that are meant to compensate communities that effectively lose the use of their land because they are being mined, and deserve and are entitled to receive compensation for that and a share in the rewards. And there are different systems that are set up to manage mining royalties, and they differ sometimes community by community. Increasingly, they're coming to be reflected in communities having equity shares in the mining ventures. Very difficult on the part of a collective to manage an equity share in its own interest, and that's why it's necessary that somebody with expertise, powers of oversight, exercises custodianship. You know, some of these accounts, I mean, the Botswana accounts, the Northwest accounts that we're looking at, haven't been audited since 1994. So, like, in 25 years, these accounts haven't been audited. And I stress we are not talking about small sums of money here. We are talking about hundreds of millions of rands. I mean, billions of rands probably in the end.
How has this been possible?
Well, I think it goes back to our original conversation. It's been possible. You know, it's part of the grand narrative of corruption in South Africa. There's no question about it, where the provinces and provincial leadership, particularly in the last 10 years, have been given carte blanche to do what they like, as long as they didn't interfere with the looting by the national leadership at the top. And this is, certainly the most lucrative sort of revenue stream that these provinces have. So it's about the cascading down of corruption, really, from the top.
So individuals are benefiting, not communities, and that's the bottom line. Is we're seeing, and I suppose the question needs to be asked: do the communities even know that they have rights? Are they educated enough to know? Hang on a second. This is our land, you're mining on it, we need the royalties, this is what the law stipulates, so we're entitled to something. Do they even know that?
They do, and they know that they've been ripped off and we're talking about for generations. I mean, the interesting thing for us about this report is that our model is to invite the public to report experiences of corruption to us, but seldom do we get reports of this scale. And this came from an ordinary member of the community who, came from the Northwest with piles of documents, some dating back decades, generations. And they know that this is their land, and they know that they're entitled to something. I mean, one of the recommendations is that there be more transparency regarding information, but they know that they've been robbed. There's no question about that.
Have individuals been pointed out? Have they been fingered in this report?
Not yet.
But you have the details of them.
What we're asking for, no, we don't. I mean, this is difficult to track. What we're asking for, we know that those accounts have been emptied. We know that there's no record of why they've been emptied or who emptied them. And what we're wanting to do is to get SCOPA, which is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, which has previously shown an interest in this, to mount another investigation. It also, dare I say it, is something that really warrants a commission of inquiry. In fact, there is a commission of inquiry in operation. Again, you would not have heard of it, from the Maluleke Commission, that apparently is doing very good work and apparently will report quite soon.
And this is looking into this exact issue?
And this is looking into these issues, yeah.
Are you able to go and sit before this commission with your evidence?
I think that its work has wound up, actually. And we're, eagerly waiting the report. I mean, we feel that this is a story that we really want to stay with, because we think that these are communities that have been let down by all of us, by all of us who have not paid attention to their plight. We know of their poverty. We know that there are big mining operations in the areas in which these communities live. We should have all put this together a long time ago. And as I say, there are some who have, but they've gotten too little attention.
Yeah,
and really, if there's one
carpet.
thing that we are good at doing, it's making a noise, and we really intend to make a noise about this one.
Yeah. So the findings of this report really do. I mean, this is absolutely frightening. The kind of picture that this paints. Completing the research. What are the recommendations? I know you're saying perhaps a commission handing this over to who? Because government is involved, community leaders are involved, the mining giants are involved. So who can rectify the situation when the big names are actually the guys that are doing this? Well,
we believe that some certain national government institutions need to intervene and take some responsibility for this, like the Department and Ministry of Mineral Resources and the Treasury needs to look into what is going on here. And we make a series of recommendations. For example, you need a best practice guide in how mining royalties are to be managed, how they are to be reported upon, when they are to be audited. I mean, yesterday at our launch in Johannesburg, where there were a group of community members who came through for the launch, one person made a very interesting suggestion in which he said there should be an ombudsman for the mining industry. I mean, I'm thinking that, what one needs, and we need to consider this, is a kind of public protector type office that is devoted entirely to the mining industry. And so there are a range, and it's complex. It's technically complex. It's politically complex. The communities, from generations of suffering in this way, are quite divided. And so there's a huge task that awaits somebody, and it really needs, arguably even a dedicated institution to deal with something of this complexity and scale.
All right, David Lewis, we have to leave it there, but really huge revelations out of this Mining Royalties Research Report for 2018, the first of its kind, uncovering the corruption and perhaps one of the biggest corruption scandals South Africa has seen. David, thank you very much for talking to us. Let's take a break. We'll see you after this with the news.